Hello, and welcome to the program. This is the Black Ponderer. My name is Neil, Neil Trotter. I'm the host of this YouTube channel. And this YouTube channel, we talk about philosophy, philosophical texts. We read philosophical texts, and then I give my supplementary commentary. And we continue that commentary down below in the YouTube section, the comment section. So that's how we roll here on the Black Ponder. And today, first of all, I know like the lighting, is it the best? No, it's kind of all over the place. But nobody, we don't really care about that at the Black Ponder. What we care about, what's important, is free Palestine. That's what's important, right? we got to prioritize. We got to prioritize what's important and what's not. And a free Palestine, and speaking up against imperialism and colonialism. These are issues that are most important, and that's why here at the Black Ponder we talk about political philosophy. Now, amongst philosophical circles, philosophy groups, oftentimes here on YouTube, even you bring up philosophy in regards to politics, and people want to shy away from that. They're like, no, I don't want to talk about politics within philosophy, and I'm trying to escape that. That's why I'm into philosophy. But as we keep saying here at the Black Ponder, some of the greatest philosophers talked about politics, absolutely, and we need philosophy when we're talking about politics to really understand what's going on, really understand the issues that are affecting us, because politics affects us all. And what's going on with Palestine, the war against Hamas and Israel, that is a political issue, in case you wasn't aware, and it is a global. It has global influence, in case you wasn't aware of that. That's what this video is about. Now, what we're going to be talking about, the title of the video is, I just hold this up because for thumbnail purposes. This is Strategy for the Liberation of Palestine. It's by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. That's a political group. And there you go. That is what I have is a printout copy. You can just find it online and print it out. It came out, this document came out in 1969. And it basically lays out like a program, a political strategy in regards to how to free Palestine. Of course, it's not the only program. I mean, various people and various groups are going about the Free Palestine movement in various ways. But I want to talk about that document because it has some really important political philosophy, I think, and it also just breaks down the reality of the situation. And I think with political philosophy, that's what's going on. Well, philosophy, one of the things about philosophy is the pursuit of truth, right? The pursuit of knowledge. And so when we're talking about political philosophy, we're talking about the truth of the politics that's going on in the world and geopolitically. And oftentimes people confuse what's going on with Palestine and Israel. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of attacks thrown at people that are not really relevant. People will say like, oh, you're for free Palestine, that means you're anti-Semitic, where it's like, well, no, that's not what's going on. All right, so we're going to talk about what's really going on. This is important. So let's start with the first quote that I picked. It's on page 23. Now, page 23 in this edition, this printout copy, I don't know if it corresponds to if you found your copy, but it's the section called Importance of Political Thought. And I'll just start here. One of the basic conditions of success is a clear perspective of things, a clear perspective of the enemy, and a clear perspective of the revolutionary forces. So, they're talking about the success to free Palestine, right? And the success of their revolution, because it's going to take a revolution to do that. But how do you do that? You got to have a clear perspective. Right? So I skip down to the end of the page. Consequently, to assure ourselves of the success of the struggle, it is not sufficient for us to take up arms. Some armed revolutions in history have ended in victory, but others have ended in failure. It is incumbent upon us to face the facts with a frank, courageous, and revolutionary scientific mentality. A clear perspective of things and of the real forces taking place in the struggle leads to success, while impetuosity and spontaneity lead to failure. This shows clearly the importance of scientific political thought. Scientific political thought. Underline that. Which guides the revolution and plans its strategy. Revolutionary political thought is not an abstract idea hanging in a vacuum. Let me repeat that. Revolutionary political thought is not an abstract idea hanging in a vacuum. Right? Political philosophy is not some abstract idea hanging in a vacuum. Right? What is it? Or a mental luxury. Or an intellectual hobby for the educated. That's not what it is. Which we can, if we wish, lay aside as unnecessary luxury. Scientific revolutionary thought is clear thought, whereby the masses are able to understand their enemy, his points of weakness or strength, and the forces that support and ally themselves to the enemy. Right? So it's a practical tool. Political philosophy, I would argue philosophy in general, is a tool, right, that we can use to make the world better and to fight oppressive, discriminatory, exploitative structures and institutions that are really causing a lot of damage. So we start there. Let's start there. We're trying to get a clear perspective. We're really trying to get a scientific, political understanding of the situation that's going on. So let's dive into that. And this is page 28. And it's a section called Israel. Right? So it starts off, I'll just read this quote. In our battle for liberation, we first face Israel. Right? And this is in regards to the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. Right? In regards to that group. But, in terms of like the Free Palestine Movement in general. Right? They're talking about Israel. So what is Israel? What is Israel? There's a lot of back and forth. Some people think it's this, some people think it's that. It's several things, but it's also what I'm about to read right now. So, Israel as a political, military, and economic entity that is trying to effect the maximum military mobilization of its 2.5 million nationals to defend its aggressive, expansionist racial structure and prevent us from regaining our land, our freedom, and our rights. In that way, Israel is state power, right? And often with state powers, they have military mobilization that has aggressive, expansionist agendas. Oftentimes based off of racial structures, but not only racial structures. It could be like a nationalism going on. But we're talking about what Israel is. Actually, we're going to generalize that right now. Because section 2 talks about the world Zionist movement. So that's another term that's thrown around a lot. Zionism. What is Zionism? Well, this is how this text describes it. So Israel is in reality an integral part of the world Zionist movement. Indeed, it is an offshoot of this movement. Thus, in our battle with Israel, we are facing not the state of Israel alone, but an Israel whose structure is founded on the strength of the Zionist movement. Zionism as a racial religious movement is trying to organize and recruit 14 million Jews in all parts of the world to support Israel, protect its aggressive existence, and consolidate and expand this existence. This support is not confined to moral backing. It is really and basically a material support that provides Israel with more people, more money, more arms, more technical know-how, and more alliances concluded by the movement by virtue of its influence. In addition to its support through publicity and propaganda in every part of the world. Thus, when we say that our enemy is Israel plus the Zionist movement, we do not add to our enemy a mere string of words, but a material force of a certain size that we must take into account in making our calculations for the battle. The battle is the battle for free Palestine. So what's being said here? Israel is a state power, right? And it is an offshoot of this Zionist movement. And what's the Zionist movement? The Zionist movement is this movement to try and coalesce or gather Jewish people in support of the state of Israel. This is important, right? This is important because what's being said here is not against Jewish people, right? There's the confusion there, and some people will toss out terms trying to throw you off, saying, "What are you talking about? You're saying you're against Jewish identity?" No. What's being said here is that the Zionist movement is a movement that tries to tie Jewish identity to this state power, which is Israel, that is exploitative. It exploits the people of Palestine for social economic power, right? That's how it's getting social economic power, money, capital, resources by the exploitation of Palestinians, right? And the taking of their land. And this exploitative action by the state of Israel tries to be justified through this movement. It's trying to gather all of Jewish people into this movement and saying, hey, this is your identity. This is your home. This is this is you. And it's important to make that distinction, right? But let's continue. This is page 31, third line. Now, does our perspective of the enemy stop at this limit? Is this the picture of all the enemy we are facing? We repeat that we would be committing a big mistake if we fail to make scientific calculations for the battle if we allow in our perspective to stop at this limit. In the battle for the liberation of Palestine, we are facing a third force, that of world imperialism, led by the United States of America. Right. My home country. It's true. So let's be clear. Let's be clear in our political philosophy, right? So Zionism is an offshoot of world imperialism, right? And what this text is saying, imperialism globally is led by the United States of America. So then this is how we're globalizing, or I don't know, that might not be the best term, because that term is used for other things. Generalizing on a global scale, that's better. The situation that's going on between Israel and Palestine, right? It isn't just happening in isolation, right? There's this social, economic, political conflict, struggle that's happening on a global scale, right? And it involves the United States of America. In fact, one could argue, as the text here does, that the United States of America is leading the charge, or to put it another way, is enabling Zionism to continue its exploitative activities against Palestinian people. So let's continue. This is page 33, and this is just a section, Who Are Our Enemies, part 2. Number 3, world imperialism. So world imperialism has its interests that it fights fiercely to defend and keep. These interests consist in robbing the riches of the underdeveloped countries by purchasing them at the lowest prices and then processing these riches and reselling them at the highest prices in the markets of these same countries. By this operation, they accumulate immense profits, enabling them to increase their capital at the expense of the people's poverty, deprivation, and wretchedness. The Arab world possesses many resources, mainly petroleum, and constitutes a big consuming market for manufactured goods. Imperialism wants to maintain this situation to allow the process of accumulation of imperialist wealth to continue on the one hand and our poverty to increase on the other. To this end, it is generally determined to crush any revolutionary movement that aims at freeing our country and people from this exploitation. So that's an explanation of what imperialism is within the context of the globe, right? The whole world. A country that has more social economic power dominates, via political and military force, smaller, underdeveloped countries. And then that domination manifests into a relationship of exploitation, where they're just taking the resources away at the expense of the native indigenous people. We see this all throughout the world, right? There's so many powers that are exploiting other countries for resources, and oftentimes wars that happen in the world are due to this. And the text is saying Zionism is just one of many of these imperialist endeavors, right? The state of Israel is just many of several states that are employing exploitative military domination to steal resources from indigenous people. And the text argues led by the United States of America. I'll continue reading here. Here, imperialism finds itself in the best position in this part of the world, because through Israel it is able to fight the Arab revolutionary movement, which aims at eliminating it from our homeland, with Israel becoming the force and the base used by imperialism to protect its presence and defend its interests in our land. Such a situation creates an organic unity between Israel and the Zionist movement on the one hand, and world imperialism on the other, because they are both interested in fighting the Palestinian and Arab national liberation movement. Thus, the protection, reinforcement, and support of Israel and the maintenance of its existence are fundamental matters for the interests of world imperialism. So it's describing the global relationship between Israel and its fight against Palestinian and Arab nations, right? And it's saying this exploitative nation is contributing to the overall exploitative activity of world imperialism. Again, it's important to understand this, because now you're starting to see this is a movement not in isolation. This is a conflict, a struggle, not in isolation. It involves many countries from many parts of the world. And I skip down to this section right here. Imperialism here means more arms, more support, and more money for Israel. It means phantom jets, atomic bomb secrets, and the building of an economy capable of facing the permanent blockade and state of war that we try to impose. Here, millions and millions of West German marks and American dollars are converted into a concrete force that increases Israeli strength and should therefore be taken into account in our calculations for the battle. Our enemy then is not Israel alone. It is Israel, Zionism, imperialism, and unless we have a clear scientific knowledge of our enemy, we cannot hope to triumph over it. So they're being very specific, and they're, really understanding this is how the problem of our exploitation is manifesting. It's manifesting through this global imperialist enterprise. It's just part of this whole exploitative endeavor by powerful state entities. This is why you have so much military support coming into Israel from other nations throughout the world. Is it this charity to aid against anti-Semitism? No. It is an already going on enterprise for involving state powers exploiting underdeveloped nations to get resources and capital. And let me continue reading here. The opinion that attempts to neutralize the Palestinian question on the international level by contending, why not try to win America to our side in the battle instead of allowing it to remain on Israel's side, is an erroneous and dangerous opinion, because it is unscientific, unrealistic, and far from being accurate. It is dangerous because it camouflages the truth about the enemy facing us and leads to erroneous calculations during the battle. The text is talking about, hey, why don't we just get American support? But then the argument is Americans are never going to support us because they benefit also by our exploitation. It's their project, right, that they are implementing. Benefiting a free Palestine would hurt American capital and American state power, right? So that strategy of let's appealing to America is not going to go anywhere, because the exploitation of Palestine by the state of Israel also feeds into American power. So let me read you page 102, third paragraph. The Palestinian liberation movement is not a racial movement with aggressive intentions against the Jews. That's not what's going on here. It is not directed against the Jews. Its object is to destroy the state of Israel as a military, political, and economic establishment that rests on aggression, expansion, and organic connection with imperialist interests in our homeland. Very important to understand that. This is a fight against imperialism. It's not a fight against Jewish people. And then I'll continue. It is against Zionism as an aggressive racial movement connected with imperialism. So that's another thing that's important, is trying to fight against the whole notion that Jewish identity is tied into exploiting indigenous Palestinians. It's a fight against that. I'll continue where I left off, which has exploited the sufferings of the Jews as a stepping stone for the promotion of its interests and the interests of imperialism in this part of the world that possesses rich resources and provides a bridgehead into the countries of Africa and Asia. So, the text is saying, look, it's actually hurting Jewish people. The Israeli state, if you really think about it, the only way it helps Jewish people, the existence of Israel, is only when the state of Israel becomes more powerful. If the state of Israel's power is threatened, then it has no interest in Jewish identity, right? And that's what this text is saying. It's like, it's all about state power. And state power is, in this context, in the context of imperialism, relies on the exploitation of other peoples, right? That's how states become powerful, is through this exploitative relationship. And so the text is arguing Jewish identity should not be tied to that. In fact, that hurts Jewish identity. So it's a movement not against Jewish people, it's a movement against Israel as a state. Why is that? Why is it against Israel as a state? Because that state is reliant on the exploitation of indigenous native peoples, right? If it wasn't reliant on that, then there wouldn't be an issue, but it is. Its very existence depends on the constant exploitation and oppression of Palestinian people. That's why this movement to free Palestine is so important, because ultimately that's wrong. Power by exploitation and oppression is immoral, it's unethical, it's inhumane, it's unjust. The aim of the Palestinian liberation movement is to establish a democratic national state in Palestine in which both Arabs and Jews will live as citizens with equal rights and obligations, and that will constitute an integral part of the progressive democratic Arab national presence living peacefully with all forces of progress in the world. Doesn't that sound lovely? The coexistence of Arabs and Jews living peacefully with all forces to progress the world. That sounds pretty peaceful. That sounds pretty nice. But let me continue reading. Israel has insisted on portraying our war against it as a racial war aiming at eliminating every Jewish citizen and throwing him into the sea. The purpose behind this is to mobilize all Jews for a life or death struggle. Consequently, a basic strategic line in our war with Israel must aim at unveiling the misrepresentation, addressing the exploited and misled Jewish masses, and revealing the conflict between these masses' interests in living peacefully in the interests of the Zionist movement and the forces controlling the state of Israel. Yeah, I mention this because it's very similar to what's going on in America. The United States of America is also a power that is founded off the exploitation of indigenous people. The Native Americans, like indigenous Americans, right? Same song and dance, different tune. And not only that, the very foundation of America was built on the slavery of African peoples. So it's very much, I really understand completely this tie between the United States of America and the state of Israel and this exploitation that's going on. If you currently look at why the United States is so powerful, you will begin to see it's because it's exploiting a lot of nations and peoples, right? And it's reliant on that. And one example of that is the state of Israel. So, I just wanted to share that. And, it's important to not get things twisted and to use like clear political thought, right? And perspective, like political philosophy. This is political philosophy right here, whether you want to believe it or not. And it's very important because it's relevant to the world today. And it is not this thing that's happening across the world only, that doesn't involve you as an American citizen, let's say. This is to my viewers in America, but maybe you're in other parts of the world, just not in the Middle East, right? And you're like, oh, that doesn't involve me. No, it actually does involve you because this is a global situation. I feel like this is important to talk about. It's a conflict that's happening right now, but it's been happening for decades, if not centuries. This struggle between native peoples of Palestine and various powers, including like the state of Israel. And I'd rather not have this be like some sort of fad or some sort of like, thing that comes up in the news, like, oh, Palestine, and then it just kind of fades. People stop talking about it, even though it's constantly going on. It's important to keep bringing it up so people will understand, this ain't right. We should be doing something about it. At least like talk against the morality of it, the unjust nature of it. And if I could do that, that's, at least I've done a little bit, it's not much, but hey, it's something, right? So I'll just keep doing that. Philosophy utilized for good. That's what I'm talking about. Well, you've been watching the Black Ponderer. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.